somebody called me, I don't know who it was, from the Army, and they were like, we recommend that you medically retire your husband. What does that even mean?
Right.
And is this something I should do? I had no clue. So at the time, I want to say Rob Nichols was his first sergeant at the time.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Does that seem right? So he was the person I probably knew and trusted the most in terms of military. So I called Rob and I was like, what do I do? And Rob was just like, well, I feel like if they're telling you this, they have a really good reason for telling you, and I think you should probably do it.
Right.
And so I did. What I didn't know at the time was that the reason that they have you medically retire them while they are injured and in critical condition, at the time Kanen was expectant or an imminent death processing. I don't even know if they use those terms anymore.
We still do, yeah.
Do you? Okay. But so basically they expected that he was going to die within 72 hours.
Right. Welcome to the Leading with Vulnerability podcast. I'm your host, Yuma Barnett, and today my guest is Kari Merriken. And yes, that name is familiar from Kari Merriken, who was on the podcast previously and told his story about his IED injury, and he has 2 special needs children and everything he's gone through 20 years plus of Army service. And I had a lot of women reach out and say, I need to hear the other part of this story. What's his wife say about all this? What was her thoughts when all this was going on? Because you guys, and if you didn't check out that podcast, make sure you go check it out. Kari's a local girl to Columbus, and I'll pass it off to Kari to let her introduce herself.
That's a funny thing because everybody's like, military and like, oh, where are you from? And I'm like, here. I'm from Columbus.
Yeah.
So yes, grew up here, went to school here. I still have some family here, and graduated from Pacelli and went on to school in Auburn.
So you're when you went to school in Auburn, what did you major in there? Because this is an interesting story.
It is. I studied animal and dairy science. I was the PreVet option because my whole life I was a little kid. I loved animals. I wanted to help animals, and so I was going to be a vet. I knew that from the time I was little, and Auburn was like the best vet school that was close by, and so I did get a scholarship, and so I was able to go, and, then I failed organic chemistry, and I began to question whether or not I was going to be, vet school was going to be right for me.
Right. I can't even spell organic chemistry, so I fully understand that. And we'll talk a little bit about your Columbus roots and stuff as we go, but we'll get straight into the primary focus of this podcast, the vulnerability, and I'll ask you what your definition of vulnerability is before we really get into the conversation.
Right at the beginning.
Yeah, right up front.
Right off the bat. I've thought about it a lot, and I've heard, what different people say, like asking for help and, being transparent or honest. But as I've thought about it, I was like, I love this definition. And it doesn't say like, this is the definition of vulnerability, but I have a good friend who has those Dove dark chocolates where they have the little sayings in them. And she has a Dove dark chocolate wrapper taped up on her cabinet, and it says, be fearlessly authentic.
Oh, yes.
And to me, I think that's just a really great definition that encapsulates vulnerability. I
agree 100%. That's actually very close to my definition, which is like owning your truest self unapologetically,
Yes.
That's vulnerability. And now that we've set the stage for it, we'll get into it a little bit. So you've seen Columbus your whole life.
Yeah.
I've seen Columbus for 20 plus years, being an infantry guy in the Ranger Regiment. And I've seen it change a lot. What have you seen change in Columbus over the years? What's the biggest things that kind of stick out to you?
Man, gosh, well, of course, Columbus Park Crossing.
Yeah.
That wasn't around when I was a kid. Dating myself here. But, it's just grown up so much with, the buildings and the restaurants. And, there used to be a lot more rural stuff and land stuff, but it's really gotten a lot more city.
Yeah, I will say from when I went to basic training back in 2000, going on Victory Drive was a little bit of a wild you didn't know what you're going to get when you went down there. And it's changed. It's changed a lot. The city's cleaned up. I never thought I would call Columbus home, but I really like it here up where we are in North Columbus, and I really like the weather. So I think Columbus gets a bit of a bad rap sometimes, because it's so transactional with the military, but I like it here.
Yeah. You didn't ask Kanen about Columbus, did you? He has a different perspective.
He's got different perspective on a lot of things.
That's true.
Right?
That's true.
Yeah, that's funny. So when you left Columbus and you went to Auburn, were you just out there and then came back to Columbus? Is that where you met Kanen?
No.
In that time?
No,
so you met him after school?
I did.
Let's talk about just your meeting of Kanen and how that all worked. Yeah.
All right. So when you were talking about going to basic at Fort Benning, and just like as I've thought about doing this, it's really funny because a lot of the guys, or the military guys and the Rangers that, I've talked to over time, of just like, the girls here hate military guys,
right.
They just didn't even try because but I was never that girl. I was always the girl that was like, military guys are awesome. Right. And so I actually met Kanen at a bar, of course. I mean, where else do you meet a Ranger?
Right.
Right? So we met at a bar, and he was trying to pick up my friend, and his friend was trying to pick me up or whatever, and talking to me, and I was like, no, he's too old for me. You're too old for me. I'm sorry. And so then Kanen tried to come convince me to go out with his friend. And I was like, no, I'm sorry. And so he was like, once he was good and sure that I was really not interested in his friend, then he started, well, what about me?
Yeah, right.
And so at the time we were both just dating around. And so we just started talking, and, we'd had a few dates and kind of weren't super serious until September 11th happened.
Right. So how long did you guys date prior to 9/11? What was
Not
the time?
very long.
Right.
I want to say we met in like early August.
Okay, yeah.
And so, I mean, we really had only been talking maybe a month, maybe 6 weeks.
Right. And then from 9/11, when that happened, a lot transpired, especially for 3rd Battalion, pretty quick. What was that like seeing that for the first time from that perspective?
It was just a whole new world to me.
Right.
Just even being immersed in, the military world. Like, I didn't grow up military, but just getting just full in, like not just your feet wet, but all the way under, and learning that about deployments and, the Rangers, and learning what they do and all of that, and deployments. And it was pretty crazy. Yeah,
I think it's different, right? People support the military and stuff, but until you have somebody vested in it, until you have a vested in, then it takes a different face. What was that like initially?
Yeah, because so I went from the girl like, military guys are awesome, to like, oh my gosh, this guy that I'm in love with is going overseas.
Right.
And it was really scary. It was really scary at first, honestly, because, here we are, we're at war, and, he's leaving.
Right.
And I don't know what's going to happen to him.
Right. And then, so in looking back on that, is that something that kind of brought you guys closer together initially?
For sure, because that's when he was like, right when he was about to deploy, like a couple weeks, is when he said, we were both dating around, and then he wanted to be serious and just date exclusively. Yeah. And so that's when we agreed to just see each other, and then he left. Yeah,
so he deployed on that first trip with 375 in October.
October of what, 2001?
2001, right? And then came back from that. It's changed so much over the years. The welcome home. It was like a hero's welcome home, those first few deployments. Sure. And then it just became like another Tuesday. Oh, they're gone again, and they're home again.
And also we were doing letters then.
Right, letters.
So that was the coolest,
Yeah, and I'm sure you still have them.
Oh gosh, yes. Yeah. Saved all his letters.
Yeah, Kate's got a shoebox around here somewhere. Yeah. Do you have them on MRE boxes and whatever Kanen could find to write it on?
I think they're most on paper.
Yeah.
Now some of the ones from Ranger School, those were a little more creative, and they were just list of foods.
Yes.
And food containers and spices and all the things that he wanted to eat.
Oh, that's funny, because that hasn't changed in the past 20 years. That's what it is. So before you guys got married, you were the Ranger girlfriend for a while. And Kate went through that too. It was a little different. You didn't get a lot of the information and the OPSEC stuff. What was that like when you couldn't get all the information everybody else had, but your future husband was still deploying and doing all that stuff? How did you get through that?
But I think because I didn't really have anything to compare it to.
Yeah.
it really wasn't that bad. It was just kind of like, okay, that's what we get. And it
Right.
was still enough, you know. If I had not been married to him when he was injured, I think that would have been a whole different ballgame.
Right.
You know? But when we were dating and he was doing okay, it really wasn't a big deal. It was a good community.
Right.
We were a part of a really good group of people. We were all close. We hung out together all the time, and it was nice.
And did he grow up in Bravo Company? Is that what company he came up in? Yeah. So,
Yeah.
I mean, that's a famous company throughout the whole regiment for, everything that
we have
Beco's done.
we
and
have
did
a
through.
big sign on our mantle. I think it used to, I can't even remember where it was, but he got it from Kyle Steinman. I don't know if you know him, but it used to hang in maybe the gym or something. It's like this board, and it's like 375 Bravo Company.
Yeah.
We still have that up.
Yeah, it's funny how we attached that first company. I'm
yes.
still, ACO 175 is still really deep in my heart, and even though I've bounced around over the years. So he deploys, how many times did he deploy before you guys got married?
He deployed 4 times before we got married.
Oh, so you had a pretty good rhythm.
I'm sorry, no, that's not right. 3 times. And on the 4th deployment was when he got injured.
Okay, so how did the marriage go, the proposal? Did you do the courthouse thing like a lot of people do and then have a ceremony later?
We definitely did the courthouse, but we did not have the traditional proposal kind of thing. Okay. It was more of a like, hey, let's get married.
Right.
And so it was very spur of the moment, and picked out a ring for me, and then we went to the courthouse with a few friends and tied the knot.
Yeah, so it's pretty normal.
Yes.
That's like SOP, standard operating procedures for us is get married before you deploy so you can get the updated BAH and tax incentives, right? And then you have a ceremony at a later date, right?
Oh, yes.
Kate and I got married. We had a ceremony, but I deployed, a few weeks later. So that's kind of how you have to find spots in our lives there for the last 20 years to have those moments, right? And
how much further was your ceremony, like from your wedding?
No, we had it together. Same time.
You did have it together.
Yeah, we were fortunate. We found like the deployments worked out to where I was home during the summer. We were able to get married, and then I deployed right after. So it's just kind of funny how that everybody's kind of got a very similar story in those last 20 years where you just had to find time for things that are normal for everybody else in the world.
That's a really good point.
Yeah. So that deployment, that was the time that Kanen got injured, right after you got married. No kids yet at the time. No. Let's talk through that a little bit, what that was like. How long had you been married before that deployment happened?
We had been, we got married April 28th, and he was injured on June 26th, so right at 2 months.
Yeah. So what was that like? What was that day like? Or when you got notified, what was the kind of the chain of events there for you?
The vulnerability part.
Right.
It's still a little hard to talk about. It's not really difficult for me on a daily basis, you know, but when I go back into that time and just all that surrounded it, So, Kanen he would call me a lot whenever he could at work, and you always look for that Fort Benning exchange number or the 999 number. And so he would call me at work sometimes. I was working at TSIS, and because, that's what you do with an animal and dairy science degree. You go to work at a credit card processing.
That's right.
But I was working there, and I got the call. And I got excited, because I was like, oh, this is Kanen calling me. We're going to talk. And then it was not Kanen.
Right.
And then I just remember it was like the world froze. And I'm talking to this guy. I don't even remember who it was, but he's telling me, that he's been injured and he's in critical condition. And, I remember the people, my friends at TSIS, just like I left work immediately.
Right.
I couldn't imagine staying there. I wouldn't have been able to function. And so I left work immediately, and then just kind of went through that whole process of getting updated as updates were available.
So were you getting updated from people overseas or from the people back in the...
I'm pretty sure. My memory fails me a little bit on that, but I'm pretty sure it was people here that were getting the updates.
So when you left TSIS, where'd you go?
I don't remember.
Yeah, I bet...
I probably went to my mom's house.
Yeah, I bet... we've all been in chaotic moments in service, and when you have to go through something, you just don't remember key details. You just kind of react and do things, and recalling it is difficult. right? It is
really
difficult.
is. There are certain moments,
right,
that I recall so clearly, like, they were yesterday, but then there are so much that's fuzzy.
Right. So during that whole time, he was in critical condition,
right,
and they presented a decision that you had to make. That's, I mean, I can't even imagine. Yeah. Right. Can you explain that a little bit?
Oh, sure. So somebody called me, I don't know, it's from the Army, and they were like, we recommend that you medically retire your husband. And I'm like, what does that even mean?
Right.
And is this something I should do? I had no clue. So at the time, I want to say Rob Nichols was his first sergeant at the time.
I think you're right.
Does that seem right? So he was the person I probably knew and trusted the most in terms of military. So I called Rob and I was like, what do I do? And Rob was just like, well, I feel like if they're telling you this, they have a really good reason for telling you, and I think you should probably do it.
Right.
And so I did. What I didn't know at the time was that the reason that they have you medically retire them while they are injured and in critical condition, at the time, Kanen was expectant or an imminent death processing. Yeah. I don't even know if they use those terms anymore.
We still do, yeah.
Do you? Okay. But so basically they expected that he was going to die within 72 hours.
Right.
And so the benefits to the spouse are better if he's retired while he's living.
Right.
And so, of course, they didn't tell me that.
Right.
And but I went ahead and medically retired him.
Yeah, I've been in the Army 20 plus years. I've never heard of something like this. And this was early on still. We were still trying to figure out how to do things, and the rehabilitation side of stuff wasn't as, and we hadn't had as many guys injured. I mean, still a significant amount, but our side, we were still trying to figure it out. So they were trying to take care of you in their own mind, but for you to have to make that decision, did you call anybody besides Rob?
I did.
Yeah,
I'm sure I did.
Yeah.
I have no doubt I did. That's just the one that that really stands out in my mind.
Yeah, I can't imagine just the level of confusion that you have, right? And were you here when that happened? He was still in Iraq during this. He hadn't been moved to Germany yet. Is that right?
Right.
So for perspective, Kanen was injured with another service member. What's his name that passed?
Well, there were two guys that passed away. There was Corporal Andrew Chris and then Timothy Conway. Yeah,
Timothy Conway. And they were they thought Conway was going to make it and Kanen was not going to make it.
That was sort of the initial feeling, was that, we have these two guys that are critically injured. And it seemed at the time that because Kanen had a traumatic brain injury and a carotid artery injury, it seemed at the time that his injuries were more severe and, he was in a more life-threatening state. And then they thought Conway was going to
more stable.
Through.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So you made that decision to retire him, and whatever admin processes has happened with that. He's still in Iraq, gets moved to Germany. Did you guys link up in Germany?
We did.
How did that all take place?
So at first I was just kind of, of course I was in communication with people in his unit, and I'm not going to do this well. I don't remember who did what.
Right.
But I remember Major Mike Foster. I have no idea what he did, but I was in communication with him, and I just remember sort of kind of waiting it out, and I was like watching movies. I was just doing anything I could
to stay busy
to keep my mind off things, because in my mind I'm thinking he's going to die. He's going to die. And so, I remember just communicating back and forth. And then at one point, I just remember telling Mike, I was like, y'all have to get me over there. I have to go over there. I can't.
Yeah.
And he was like, okay, we'll see what we can do.
Did you go by yourself?
I didn't. Kanen's mom went with me.
Yeah. So.
And we had a military liaison, of course.
Okay. That traveled with you. Mm-hmm. So did you fly out of Atlanta? Is that what you did to launch duel? Mm-hmm. Right. How was that process? What was that trip like?
Well, I think if we had not had our liaison, that was David Easterbrooks. Never forget him. And he was the right guy for the job, because he just was a positive guy. He knew what he was doing, and he just took good care of us. And he just made sure, do you need anything, and he knew what he was doing. And so we had someone to follow, and we weren't trying to figure things out. And so we flew over there, and of course, we get to launch duel, and we get directed to the Fisher House, I think.
Yes.
I think it was a Fisher House over there.
Probably. Yep.
And I remember we're going and getting into our room in the Fisher house. And of course, I'm just like devastated and brokenhearted because I'm trying to like be on a plane and stay in a place, and I can't get to Kanen.
Yeah. Oh, right.
I can't get to him. And he was he wasn't at Launchstool. I don't know if he told
really?
you that.
No.
Right. So several of the guys that were also injured, I want to say Kanen and I talked about this the other day. Just 10 guys maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe 11 guys on there and 10 guys were injured, something like that. And the other guys were at Launchstool, but Kanen, because he had a brain injury, they didn't feel like they were equipped at Launchstool to handle it. And so they put him in a German hospital. So he was in Hamburg, Germany. Not Hamburg with an A, Hamburg with an O.
Oh, okay.
And so so we got to Launchstool, and we couldn't go see Kanen. It had to sort of be arranged and coordinated.
Right.
And so
customs issues and all that stuff.
And getting us to the hospital because it was not, it was a distance. I don't even remember the distance. So it was a while. So we got there and I still couldn't see him. So his mom and I went to go see the guys that were at Launchstool. So we went and saw his buddies.
And you knew a lot of them.
Or
most of them, probably all of them. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we were all, familiar with each other, and that was good. It was good to be able to see them, and, of course, I wanted to be there with Kanen, but that was the next best thing to be there with his brothers.
Right.
And, talk to them.
Did they share some of the story with you about what happened there in that time?
They may have, but I don't remember.
Right. So when you got to Germany, how long did it take you to finally get to go see him?
I don't remember. I want to say it was a day or two.
Oh, really? That's got to be very just frustrating and a lot of anxiety around that,
Yeah,
right?
I remember we went to eat at a German restaurant, and I'm like, I'm in Germany. I've got to drink a beer, And I was like, I can't even enjoy this beer. Like, it was like, I was just consumed.
Right. Probably just kind of numb to everything.
Exactly. Just consumed with that feeling.
And were you getting updates on where he was and how he was doing during that time? Do you remember?
I don't remember.
Because obviously at that point, he's lived longer than anybody thought he's going to. Right. So, I mean, that's got to be a little bit encouraging in some aspects, hopefully, for you.
I do remember, and this is going to sound really strange, but I do remember one of the guys there, and I think he was a flight surgeon maybe, Kevin Kennard, and he was showing Kanen's mom and he was showing us maybe CAT scans of Kanen's brain.
Yeah.
And showing us some of the like, okay, here's where, there's, I mean, he wasn't being insensitive at all. He was just showing, the injuries, I was like, there's some shock damage here, whatever. And this is what happened here. And, and I mean, that's what we're doing while we're waiting to see. It sounds so clinical, but it was just passing the time until I could get to where he was.
So what was it like that moment you finally got to go in there and see him?
That was really, hugely emotional, because I just remember, like looking at him and he was all swollen.
Was he still in a coma at the time?
Yes, he was in a medically induced coma and he was all swollen and his head was massive, and I mean, his skull was out. Like, I don't even know if I knew that at the time. They had in the field, they had taken off his skull on the left side because of the swelling. Right. And so his skull was out, but his head was still so huge because of all the swelling. So you couldn't even tell that his skull was missing. And of course, you see all the little nicks and cuts, from the shrapnel and everything. And he's got all this equipment hooked up on him. And so it was just like...
It's probably not the relief you wanted, right? Like you're going in there and hoping for something else and you get in there and it probably even makes you take a step back and...
Yeah.
See how big the situation is.
Yeah, and it's very much like it's a whole new unknown. So there's that push that's pushed. Like I got to get to him. Now I'm here with him, and there's this: what's going to happen? Right. Is he going to wake up? Is he going to live?
Right. Yeah, because you're to him, but you can't talk to him. Right. Right. Yeah. It doesn't look.
It doesn't look good at all. Like I didn't know if he was going to live. And one of my biggest fears, and I don't know if it was, rational, but because he had a brain injury, I was just terrified that he wasn't going to know me. Oh. That he was going to wake up and not know who I was.
Right. It's those little things that come into your mind that you don't even think, that you're not consciously thinking of, but I would probably have the same thought.
Yeah.
Like, is he even going to recognize me or know who I am?
Like, what kind of brain damage is going to be there?
If he does live, what kind of quality of life? I mean, you have a lot of stuff going through your head at this time that I can't imagine having to go through that. So how much time did you and his mom spend in Germany before coming back stateside?
It's going to be around about, I want to say maybe like 5 days, something like that.
Did you travel back with him?
I did. Okay. I got to fly back on the military plane, and that was quite a process because first they had to move him, and I don't remember how I got connected with him. I just remember being on the bus at Ramstein Air Force Base with him.
Right.
And so they have him on, a hanging stretcher on the bus, and, I'm right there next to him. And then they're taking us to the military plane. I guess we flew out. We must have flown out of Ramstein.
Yeah, probably.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
And then, we're in there. That was my birthday.
You flew out on your birthday?
That was the day. Yeah, we flew out on my birthday. So I spent the, first part of my birthday in Ramstein, the middle half of my birthday in the air, and the last half of my birthday I spent at Walter Reed Hospital. So
it's like a good birthday and a terrible birthday all at the same time, right? And still unconscious?
Yep. Still medically induced coma. So they were keeping him in that coma intentionally.
And how long did that last?
So they started trying to wake him up at Walter Reed, and the first time didn't go well. I remember that. And they told me that. They said, it may not go well, and, we might have to try again. And so the first time didn't go very well. And I mean, like, I'm shaking right now just thinking about it. I was unglued. It was just like.
And I assume you probably weren't in the room when they were trying to do it? You were in the room. Wow, that's
it's just really hard to watch.
I can't even imagine, right? So he had to go back into the medically induced coma for a minute, and then they tried again.
I think they tried again the next day.
Oh, the next day. So a pretty quick turnaround.
Yeah, it was a quick turnaround. But like, you don't know that.
Oh, no.
You're in the middle of it, and you're like, they can't wake him up, and it's not going well, and, like, what does this mean? And you overanalyze everything.
Yeah.
Number one, being me, and then number two, just, being in that kind of a situation.
Right. So the second time when he woke up, how was that for you?
So he woke up and he knew me.
pretty quick?
I think so. I feel like I remember, like, pretty quick, but he was very out of it.
Yeah.
Like, his eyes looked completely different when he first woke up. They were very childlike. That's the only way I know how to describe it. And, there were other things he did. This is really embarrassing. I'm sorry, babe. But, like, he couldn't, like, control his bowels and stuff. Yeah. So he's going to the bathroom in the bed and, just very, like a baby.
Right.
Like, he did not know what he was doing or what was going on. But he did know me. He knew his mom. And so, like, we can handle it. We can get through anything from there.
Was mom with you the whole time through all this?
I think so. We stayed at the Malone house right next to Walter Reed, and we were there for about 3 weeks.
Right.
And
so after you woke up and went through, how long did it take for him to kind of gain a little more consciousness and you could have conversations with him and stuff?
It was definitely very gradual.
Yeah.
So, I want to say to the point that he was, like, more lucid and coherent. I want to say it had to be at least a week.
Okay. Well, in perspective, like, that's not that long,
right? No,
after everything,
not at all.
From where he came from,
yes,
to being retired. Yeah. You retired him from the Army, and then you're talking to him finally, a month later or whatever that timeline is. That's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
Right. In retrospect. Sure. And so did he remember the event? Was he concerned about the boys? Like, what happened?
I don't remember what he remembered at the time. I feel like he was just really out of it. He had a lot of really weird dreams that he felt like were reality.
Right.
And there's a really funny story about that. So he told Rob Nichols, I don't remember where I was. I was probably down at the cafeteria getting food or something like that. But Rob was there visiting, and he told Rob Nichols that he's like, I gotta hurry up and get out of the hospital. My wife's pregnant with triplets.
Oh.
Yeah. He's like, I got it. And so I walked into the room, and Rob was like, so Kanen tells me y'all are expecting triplets. And I was like, what? I was like, no, but apparently that was one of the dreams that he had, and he thought it was real. Like,
oh, wow.
And Kanen looked at me and he was like, you're not? I was like, no. So it was just a really weird phase. And then out of him merging from this world that had been his reality in the coma to back to the real world and trying to discern what was what.
Right. And I mean, I'm sure all the medicine and everything he's on,
probably didn't
putting him to sleep, didn't help. And I'm glad, I mean, hopefully if you're having triplets, you'd be aware of it.
Yes, right. I would hope so.
So what was the process from Walter Reed? What were the steps? What did you kind of do there?
We did a lot of paperwork. I remember that. A bunch of paperwork. And then we did, we had a lot of visitors, which was cool. And then just 3 weeks worth of, appointments and testing. And he had some infections. I want to say he had bacterial meningitis and they had to clear that. And then once he was able to get up and walk around and stuff,
and that happened at Walter Reed?
It did happen at Walter Reed. I remember, and I also remember they took him for some test. I can't even remember what it was. And this is when he was still in that in-between state. He had like an IV or something in his arm, and they were taking him for some kind of test with IV dye. And I just remember him sitting there and just ripping the IV, and they were like, he was like, I don't want this. He just ripped it right out. And so it was just a lot of that. And then we did get to he could go down in the cafeteria with me. Yeah. And I feel like I remember them letting us, go off campus.
Oh, yeah. Oh, that's good.
So
that happened pretty rapidly that he was
considering it was a course of 3 weeks, it was rapid, but in the middle of it, time is like standing still.
Oh, yes. And then from Walter Reed, where did you guys go?
So at the time, traumatic brain injuries were just, very new to what we were dealing with. And so they sent us to the James Haley VA in Tampa. Mm-hmm. And that was where we were supposed to do all his, rehab or whatever. And at the time, so they're trying to get him to do occupational therapy and physical therapy and speech therapy and all the, addressing the areas of his brain that were impacted. Right. And, he doesn't want to do it.
Yeah, just frustrated with the process.
He doesn't want to do any of it. Right. He's like, I just want to go home. I'm fine. Let me out of here.
Right.
Let me out of here.
That's very, that's cultural with us, I think. We think we've got it. Right.
Oh, yeah.
We've got it from here. Leave me alone. Yeah. Right. We're all guilty of that. And we talked about that some when he was on here. Yep. So how long in Tampa before?
A week.
Just a week?
Yeah. He was like, get me out of here. He wouldn't stop hounding them. And finally, and I think in retrospect, if they had known more, they would have never let him go. Right. But like I said, it was the beginning of the TBIs. And so they let him go after a week. And, I wish they hadn't, but.
Yeah. Hopefully they learned something from him.
Oh, sure.
While they were there.
Sure they did.
And it helped somebody else out in the future. Yeah. That's the only way you can really look at something like that, right?
Yeah. By the time he decided that he actually would benefit from intervention, it was too late, really. Yeah.
So you come back to Columbus?
Yeah.
And he processed out of the Army? Is that kind of what happened there?
Trying to remember. I know that we came back. We had a bunch of people meet us at the airport. Yeah. And some people had set up our house and made it all nice for us. And we went home, and it was just kind of like a readjusting process.
Yeah.
And figuring out, I know we had more appointments and transitioning to working through the VA instead of, active duty type care.
And that wasn't as good back then either. It was difficult. Mm-hmm. It still has its challenges, but back then it was definitely, they were learning again.
Yes. Yeah. We've come a long way.
So you come back to Columbus, he transitions out of service. You stayed in Columbus for a little bit, right?
We did. Yeah. He wound up, I know he spoke about that, wound up going to work for the Wexford group, and that was good for him to be able to work with a bunch of, ex-military guys. And he enjoyed that for a while. And his dad was sick. His dad was sick with cancer. And so that was kind of the goal, was to get to New Mexico so that we could be there with his dad. He was dying. So. And
then, so you ended up moving to New Mexico for a while. So you've been in Columbus, Georgia, the South, your whole life. What was it like moving out to the high desert out there in Albuquerque?
Oh, man. I'm a family girl.
Right.
I didn't want to go. Uh-huh. Surprise, surprise. But we needed to go. And I'm so glad we did. It was the right thing for sure. But it was like, where are all the trees?
I know. Yeah. And the rain.
What is Xeriscape? You know, it was like all the yards don't have grass; they have rocks.
Yeah, rocks and cactus.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like, what is this place?
Yeah, and the houses have stucco and brick siding.
Yes, and the food. Oh my goodness. You know,
the food's amazing.
Where it is.
Yeah.
Oh, I love it now.
Yeah.
But at the time, you know, I'm like,
red chili, green chili. What is this all about?
It's amazing.
Yeah.
And I love it now. But at the time, I was like, where are the mashed potatoes and gravy
right.
and the grits and, you know, all that.
That's same with Kate. You know, she's from Atlanta.
Right.
And she told me, I'm from the middle of nowhere, Atlanta. And I went to Alpharetta. That's where the middle of nowhere was. And I said, I'll show you the middle of nowhere, you know. And then took her to New Mexico. But the big, wide open spaces. Yes, it's a beautiful place if the wind wouldn't blow all the time. Yeah, the Sandia Mountains going up in there. So how long did you guys stay out in New Mexico? And what was that like? What Kanen do and you do while you were out there?
It's about 1.5 years. And I'm trying to remember. He had a really good friend, Travis Roth, and his wife, Stephanie, that we wound up really linking up with them. And we just, you know, we did stuff with them all the time. This is before we had kids. Right. They had a little girl, and but we would go back and forth to each other's houses, eat dinner together, you know, stuff like that.
Was he a former Ranger, Travis?
Yes,
yeah, that's right. That's what I thought.
Sure is. And so we spent a lot of time with them. Spent a lot of time like connecting with Kanen's family, and then I eventually got a job working at Curves. Do you remember Curves?
Oh, yeah.
All the rage. So I worked at Curves for a while, and then Kanen tried to get a job and just couldn't find anything that was a really good fit. And then he wound up doing technical school for a while.
Oh, okay. So during that time, obviously he came back in the Army.
Yeah.
Could you see something on him as the regiment's deploying still? He's still hearing from guys deploying that something was kind of missing in his life there, that he was just not the same?
Well, yeah, but it was for me too.
Right.
And that's thing. That's the thing. I was like, when I was watching the podcast with you, I was like, this was not a story of him doing this and dragging me along.
Right.
I wanted to be back in Ranger Battalion as much as he did. Like, I felt like we were not finished, you know? And I don't know if it's because, you know, just that patriotic sense, the way that I love the military, and now, you know, I'm just dedicated. I love Ranger Battalion. I love Rangers. I mean,
yeah, I think
they're the best of the best. And I know that sounds like I'm trying to be, you know, but it's just the truth.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that, because I think a lot of people do see the spouses and there's a bad rap sometimes you get drug around. And, and I mean, in some cases might, right? If you have to PCS more or move more, but it's a special place, not only for us, but for the spouses. You guys definitely build some community and lifelong friends in there that you don't realize until it's gone sometimes.
For sure. And, you know, we're the warrior wives.
Right.
You know? And it's like, it makes me think about one of the first books I read that Kanen got me to read when we were dating is Gates of Fire.
Yeah, that's
you know, and the way I see it is like the Rangers are the 300.
Yep.
You know, and we're the warrior wives, and we got to be strong enough to send our guys off and to do what needs to be done back home.
Right. So what was that conversation like when he decided to try to come back in the Army? What was that like with you? And
it was just like, hey, let's get back in. We both wanted it.
Right.
You know?
That's good.
And so it wasn't one of those things where I was like, oh my gosh, what are you thinking?
Right.
It was like, I wanted it as much as
because
he did.
Yeah. I think listeners, you could think that, right? After everything you've been through, like the war's still going. Like that could happen again, but they didn't really have that. You had a different perspective on it. It sounds like.
It just felt like where we belonged. I felt like we weren't done.
That's pretty amazing. And when I'm talking to Kanen and you hear everything he went through, if I'm that person at that time and he's telling me he's going to go back to the Army, I'd be like, there's absolutely
after a brain injury,
there's no way. There's not going to happen. You're 100% disabled.
They're not going to let you back.
They're not going to let you back in. Were you kind of worried about did you have that thought too?
That was probably my greatest fear. Yeah. I was just really worried they weren't going to declare him fit for duty.
Right. And then he goes through all the physical process and then runs back into that neurosurgeon in El Paso, I believe, that treated him in BIOP, that I think eventually kind of okayed him.
He did.
To come back,
He did, yeah.
That's crazy. That shows meaning. I think that's just sometimes things are meant to be, right?
Yeah.
Is that kind of how you feel about
totally.
it? Yeah.
Totally.
So what was it like leaving New Mexico and coming back to Columbus? Because even when he came back, he didn't know he was going back to regiment. I don't think, right?
Because they couldn't guarantee that.
Yeah, some more stars aligned when he got back on Fort Benning here.
Yeah, he had to come back in without knowing where he was going to go, but he had some like connections or some friends that were supposed to like usher him back into Battalion.
Right. So was it nice to get back to Columbus when you guys got back here?
Well, of course. I mean, I was so happy to come home and be back with my family, but at the same time, I was just getting to where I was starting to like
settling in,
appreciate and love New Mexico.
Right.
And so as I told Kanen that by the time I got to like it, we were leaving.
Right. So when he came back, what rank did he come back in as? Do you remember? Probably an E5 or...
That seems right.
Well, I
want to say E5.
Right. Yeah, because I had a break in service too. I came back as an E5 around the same time he did. So...
And it was 2005. September 2005.
Yeah, I came back in December 2005, right? So that's...
Y'all's stories are so...
Very similar.
Parallel there.
Except for I didn't get the injury part. We skipped that part. So when you came back, how long were you guys back in Columbus before that next deployment came up?
Oh, gosh. We talked about that this morning. See if I can remember. 2006. So about a year.
Yeah. And
no, because it was late 2005 when we came back. It was more like 6 months.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Yeah. September. Yeah. Right.
So his first deployment was spring 2006.
And did any emotions or regret or like...
So many. No regret.
No regret, but it's probably just a little bit of in the back of your mind.
I was like, this is everything we worked for.
Right.
For him to be back and be functional in duty and like... be with these guys, and then I was like, what if something happens?
Right.
I did. Yeah. I did. It's kind of like when I know we'll talk about this in a bit, but when I lost my first baby, and then I got pregnant with Caleb, that whole first bit, I was terrified of losing Caleb.
Right.
And it was sort of a similar thing. It was like, okay, this is everything I hoped for.
Yeah.
What if he gets injured and dies?
Yeah.
We got lucky the first time.
Right. So we'll kind of close out the service part, Kanen, and talk about some of the other stuff you just kind of brought up there. I'll say one more thing about that is just like, how proud are you of him to get through all of that? What emotion comes when you think about everything he went through and where he's at today?
Kanen is the strongest, most resilient, most incredible man I've ever known in my life. And he will never quit. Yeah,
that's a fact, yeah. So when you stood there and you pinned that Sergeant Major star on his chest, well, how did that feel?
I mean, he deserved it.
Absolutely, yeah.
Like, he deserved it.
What an amazing story of resiliency from Kari Merriken. Make sure you tune in next week to listen to the rest of her amazing story. You're going to be blown away by what she shares and how open she is. And how much she just truly wants to help somebody else out there that might need a little pick-me-up or has been through tough times. Huge thank you to her for coming on here and being vulnerable like this. And make sure, again, like I said, tune in next week and like, share, and subscribe. And leave us a comment and give us your feedback. I truly appreciate it. And we'll see you next week on part 2 with Kari Merriken.